right, let me call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled Greer City Council meeting called and convened this May the 13th, 2014. We'll have a couple of things going on this evening. We are going to go right into our regular session this evening, and that will be followed, I think we may have some items for executive session and then a workshop in regards to the budget following that, so you can stay as long and as late as you want to this evening, because we're going to be around for a little while, it looks like. Having called the meeting to order, I'd like to ask Councilman Wayne Griffin, if he would, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation. So if you will stand, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Father God, it's once again a few little humble servants can call on thy holy and righteous name. Father, I want to say thank you for all the many wonderful blessings that you bestowed upon our city. Father God, if you would, bless our employees. Father God, I ask you to bless this council, Father God. Lead, guide, and direct us, that the things we may do may be pleasing in thy sight. These are all the blessings that your precious Son, in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Ms. Duncan, anybody to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
With that then, Council, you have the minutes of the council meeting from April 22nd contained in your packet. I'll entertain a motion that they be received.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Talbot,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council departmental reports are contained there in your packet as well. As always, they are there for your review, and any questions that might arise from that, please feel free to contact either the administrator or department head in regards to those items that you may have questions or comments about. With that, then we'll move to the administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. A couple of things we want to report. Since we last met, we did have a very successful Amnesty Day. Many of you were able to come down and visit with us. We'll have some more specific information in our monthly report, but I did want to share with you that we had a significant increase in participation this year. We tried some additional marketing efforts to make sure that our community was aware of that event, but we actually had 111 more vehicles that came to our site this year than we had last year. We collected 1,567 containers of paint, 209 containers of chemicals, 68 gallons of oil, 61 vehicle tires, 155 e-waste items, 1,376 pounds of paper that was put through the shredder, and 105 pounds of drugs that will be destroyed by our police department, expired prescription medications. Very, very successful day for us. And then we also had the opportunity to share with our community some information concerning our recycling program. We shared that with folks as they came on site with us. We feel very, very fortunate to be able to continue to do that program. We appreciate the support the council gives us to do that, appreciate the support that the community lends in that, and also our partners over at ACE Environmental. Again, very, very successful annual event for us. Since we last met, we also had our community celebration of Family Fest. Saw many of you in and around the festival during that weekend. It was a wonderful weather weekend. We had great participation. Our partnership with the Great Greer Chamber of Commerce has been successful for a number of years, and this year that success continued. So we very, very much enjoyed being able to show off City Park as part of the festivities of the weekend for Family Fest. Another great event. We are continuing to move forward with our partners over at the partnership for tomorrow. As you are aware, we are engaged in a community master plan process. We had about 40 folks that were involved last week in an exercise for that master plan process. We are also we'll be unveiling to the community through a press announcement here in the next couple of days relative to an online survey instrument that we will be distributing community-wide. This will involve residents of the city as well as folks outside the city. It is a community master plan, and we are a partner in that, and it is continuing to move forward. There will be a series of community meetings as part of that master planning process as well. You'll receive information on those. I believe the next one is in mid-June, June 12th, I believe it is. Is that correct, Mike? June 12th will be the next community meeting of that, but prior to that, you'll start to receive information concerning the website that has been developed for the master planning process, as well as the information on how to do the online survey. I think you'll find that quite interesting. You have received some information concerning the summer conference for the Municipal Association. We do ask your attention to that. The process has become kind of routine for us, but it's still a very kind of competitive process because there's always more people that are attending that meeting than there are spaces available in the host hotel. So we're in a lottery system as we attend that meeting, but it will be in Charleston this year. And so as in early July, as we plan to participate in that training exercise, that training program, this summer we will need some information from you concerning your travel plans, whether or not you do intend to attend the meeting, and how long you will be there. Tammy has provided some information to you that we'll need by the next meeting is when we will need that. So appreciate your attention to that as well. For your upcoming calendar, we ask that you place June the 7th on your calendar. That is the date of our employee family picnic. It'll be here at City Hall. It will also be out on the city park grounds. That'll be from 11 until 2 on that Saturday. I have a very new and exciting theme for our employees and their families this year. Have some new activities planned for that event. So we do hope that you're going to be able to join us as all of Team Greer comes together to celebrate our families and us as co-workers and as team members as part of Team Greer. Again, June 7th from 11 to 2 here at City Hall. I sent some information to you earlier today concerning a meeting next week with the Spartanburg County Municipal Association. If you've not had an opportunity to see that email yet, I do encourage you to do that. There is a meeting with the Spartanburg County Municipal Association, and it's always good for us to be able to participate with the other municipalities in Spartanburg County, and if your schedule would allow, we certainly would encourage you to join the group next week over in Spartanburg for that meeting. Again, that will be on Thursday, May 22nd. And you can just give us some feedback information on that, and we'll be glad to make sure we get you registered for that meeting as well. Those are the items, mostly calendar items, that I needed to make council aware of. There are 2 matters for executive session that I would like for your consideration. Both of those are contractual. One is involving our contract for our curbside waste collection program, and the other is contractual concerning an offer to us for the purchase of a piece of property. And I'd like to provide some information to council on both of those items, please. That would conclude my report, and certainly available to answer any questions.
Does one of the 2 include the executive session matter that I made you aware of this afternoon?
Yes, sir. That's the property offer.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we have a total of 2.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Council will move to the items of old business this evening. The first of which is the second and final reading of Annexation Ordinance 5-2014. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Ramon Perez and Clara Valencia located at 719 Ansel School Road by 100% petition and to establish a zoning classification of R12 for said property. Mr. Pace?
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on April the 21st. No one spoke in favor or in opposition to this request. Therefore, the planning commission did vote unanimously to approve the annexation and zoning of the property located on 719 Ansel School Road.
Council will entertain a motion to receive.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion or question.
Mr. Pace,
Yes, sir.
this annexation was due to sewer, is that?
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad that CPW and we, as a city, could work with them and help them out. As far as policy or procedures, was the annexation petition, all the paperwork done before? Because I do know that just based on the construction, all of the sewer was tied in, well, long before tonight, so all the paperwork was.
Yes, sir. We had the actual annexation petition in hand with meeting date scheduled prior to any connection by CPW. They did call and at first thought they might have to do out-of-city rates, but after discussion, I told them that I did have the petition in hand and would be moving forward with the annexation. They were comfortable with that.
Great.
And Mr. Pace, I believe I'm correct in that work did not proceed until after we had done first reading, because this is second reading.
I think that, yes, I believe that because it happens before the planning commission. Yes, sir.
Before the planning commission for first, because we've been holding that for second reading.
I believe the tap was made before,
But
but that's okay, as long as we were.
Yeah,
we were communicating with them, but that was the intent.
Yeah, we were within contact of CPW.
That's fine, I
Again,
just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
our procedure was, I'm glad that they're part of us now and that everybody can work together to, help them out, so.
Yeah, he was under a order by DHEC to get something done
Okay.
within a very short time frame of when it happened.
Others? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Second and final reading of annexation ordinance 6-2014, an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Donald and Denise Dillard located on Give Shoals Road by 100% petition, and to establish a zoning classification of DRD for said property. Mr. Pace?
Mayor, if I could, I just noticed a typographical error. That should be Dennis Dillard, Donald and Dennis by the application that I have. So that would be a error there. In correction of that, however, if I can go ahead and speak to ordinance 6 and 7 as they relate both to Greystone Cottages. However, they are separated a little bit. But both of those properties went before the Planning Commission on April the 21st. No one did speak in favor or in opposition to the request, and the request was for an extension of the DRD zoning that we have given the other phases of Greystone Cottages, and for the incorporation into a green space that was also annexed into the city to make it entirely a part of the Greystone Cottages. And again, after no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the request, the Planning Commission did unanimously approve these said requests.
By show of hand, are either one of the Dillards with us this evening? All right, we're going to assume that's Dennis then. Having noted that correction, entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, item C is the second and final reading of annexation ordinance 7-2014. This is an ordinance to provide for the annexation of property owned by Greystone Cottages homeowners located on Shandrick Drive by 100% petition, and to establish a zoning classification of DRD for said property. Mr. Pace has given us some background in that regard. Any additional information, Mr. Pace?
None.
I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Questions? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
Thank move to items of new business this evening, the first of which is in regards to a paving project. You have the bid summaries for the Operations Center paving project. Mr. Seifert will bring us information in that regard.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mr. Burns will be with us here tonight too if you have any questions that you may direct towards him. There's quite a few details surrounding this bid summary that you need to be aware of to better enable your discussion this evening. The city did advertise for the paving project for paving the parking lot for the Operations Center. And as advertised, there was to be held a mandatory pre-bid meeting with the bid summary, or bid opening, to be held on Thursday, May 1st, 2014. At the pre-bid meeting, there were 4 companies that were there at the beginning of the mandatory meeting, and of those 4, 1 chose not to bid. So 3 of those 4 companies have bid summaries in the summary that you have in front of you. A 4th company that entered a bid did not make it to the mandatory pre-bid meeting on time, however did call the morning of the meeting prior to the meeting ever taking place, stating that he was having some issues and made arrangements to come to a meeting with Mr. Burns at a later time that day. And then we had an additional company that is on this bid summary that has been disqualified, that did not attend the mandatory pre-bid meeting, did not call us and contact us that he was having any issues. He did contact us the day of the bid opening and told us of an emergency he had that day, could he come bid. Now, we typically do not turn down bid proposals, but there is no guarantee that he would be considered in the process. But he did come that morning of the bid opening, took measurements, and did, by the time we had the bid opening, did submit a bid. But as I stated, by not meeting any of the other requirements that were advertised, that one has been disqualified. And if you're looking at your bid summary, the one company that was disqualified is the low bidder of $21,582, and again, that one has been disqualified. Now, before I move on, and there are some other details you need to be aware of, there are 2 reasons that we're bringing this to you tonight. First is, as noted in the summary, the second bid amount there is $24,625. After this qualification becomes the low bid, but in parentheses you see noted there are some exceptions. Now, as I've explained, this is the company that called us before the pre-bid meeting and made arrangements to come later, but was not there at the time of the advertised meeting. So he does have a technical exception. The second reason we're bringing this to you tonight is, depending on what you may decide to do, is the third low bidder at $27,919 is in excess of the $25,000 limit, which will require us to bring this bid to you for your approval anyway. So again, 2 reasons. One is a technical exception, and then the second one is, if we go with the next bid, it is over $25,000. Now, I want to point out that in our bid documents, this is advertised in every bid that we do. There's a statement in there, and it's a legal waiver, or a legal statement that says, the city reserves the right to reject any and all bids, and to waive any technicalities in any bid, and to award the bid in the best interest of the city of Greer. So I just want you to make sure that you're aware of that statement that is there to, again, enable your discussions. So what is at issue here is the second bid has a technical exception. Just to reiterate again, called beforehand, made arrangements to view later. The third bid has met all advertised requirements and advertised qualifications, and has met all qualifications in that manner. So we bring this to you tonight for your discussion and for your action as you may see fit as the best direction of the city.
Mr. Cypher, reminded me again in terms of local entities in regards to bids. I know we give some consideration to local companies, and that is applicable. I know we've talked about it for cars. Is it other contracts as well?
It applies to any bid, yes, sir. That is a 5% reduction for comparative purposes only, but the maximum amount is 5% up to $1,500. But to be considered for that, they have to make application to the city and have to be approved before the bid process, and to include the local vendor preference certificate with their bid package. None of these are inside the city.
Is it the recommendation of staff that we would use the third lowest bidder, Panagakis Asphalt Paving?
We make no recommendation.
Is it?
It's a matter of policy, and that is the reason that we bring it to council. It truly is a policy issue. It was easy, it was very clear for us that the low bid was a disqualified bid. There was no attendance at the advertised mandatory pre-bid conference. Therefore, they did not meet the qualifications to submit the bid. The second is that matter of whether or not, the truth is, they did not attend the meeting. They made notification to us that they had a transportation issue. They met with us and received the same information that was presented in the pre-bid conference, but they did not attend that meeting. As a matter of policy, what we have to ask of council is, should that second bid be accepted or rejected? If that bid is accepted, that would be the low bid, and that would be our recommendation to accept the low bid. If their non-attendance at that pre-bid meeting does indeed disqualify them, then our recommendation would be the low qualified bidder, which would then be Panagakis. Because it is over $25,000, it would have required council's action anyway.
Would it be proper, because the third low bid from Panagakis, they met all the requirements as far as bidding procedure? Would it be proper to go to Panagakis and say, our budget is $25,000. If you match $25,000, you're therefore awarded the contract, because we are able, by our own policies, we're able to do that, correct? We can.
You can negotiate that. You can accept, reject. Council's role, obviously, is to act in the best interest of the city. And the reason that it's a policy issue, for staff, we do not have the authority to reject that bid. You do. We do not.
Mr. Airwood, I'd like to, I know Panagakis' work. He's done some work for my employer, and I certainly got no problem with Panagakis. I think they've done an excellent job where I've used them. I'd like to make a recommendation, though, if we're going to make an offer to him in that regard. I mean, we do have a local bidder here, and while he is the high bidder of this group, knowing his involvement in the community and the fact that that we've used some outside, actually I think out of state, maybe even to do some work on that facility out there. I'd like to see if we couldn't use somebody local to do some work out there. I'd like to make that offer to the Ashmore brothers.
If I might like to clarify this one thing, Mr. Airwood, the $25,000 is an ordinance requirement that if it is in excess of $25,000, that as staff we must bring that to you for your approval. That's not necessarily the budget we have for.
No, okay.
Correct.
What was the budget? What was the budget?
22.
22 was the budget.
Did they know that the budget was 22? No.
Council, I'd like to make a recommendation that we, negotiate with Ashmore Brothers before we move forward. We can reach an agreeable price with them. I'd like to see us use a local contractor. I'm not sure in light of having taken bids how we do that exactly, but I'd like to give them an opportunity.
That's a technical aspect. According to the ordinance, we would be rejecting all bids. And at that point, according to our procurement ordinance, we can, at your approval, begin private negotiation.
Well, my recommendation would be that we reject all the bids and that we would authorize staff to negotiate with Ashmore Brothers to have the work done.
Do we need to vote on this, or do we need to amend the motion to do that?
I don't think we've got a motion on the floor yet, do we? I can alternate the motion.
Don't we have a motion right now? We don't have a motion. Okay. Well, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second then to reject the bids as we have them here, and to authorize the staff to enter into negotiations with Ashmore Brothers to secure a price on paving the operations center.
Discussion. Is there more discussion? Yeah, the Ashmore Brothers, they're of course very active in the community, and it's as local as we can be. That's the way I prefer it. However, if I think this may set a bad precedent, because we will have local contractors now who will be bidding against contractors from out of town, and you know, all these people, they all talk, and they're well, we just won't bid for the city. And then it's the fewer bidders we have, and we've seen it before where we wind up with one, and then we wind up with a really high bid and one bidder because people don't bid. And I think that I don't know if I'm not opposed to disqualifying all of the bids, but I would prefer that we rebid it because we have one that is disqualified by our policy. The second low bidder, he would have been disqualified, but he made prior arrangements. And then so that makes the third low bidder almost $6,000 over budget. I would say that I would prefer if we are not going to award it to the low bidder, then we disqualify all of the bids and have it rebid.
Right. I'd still like to offer motion and second that we've got on the floor. If that fails, then we'll move forward with yours. Motion and second on the floor is to reject all bids and to allow staff to negotiate with Ashmore Brothers. Further discussion?
Well, and I think, I agree with Jay somewhat that it might set a precedent, but the fact that they're all over budget, I think gives us the ability to do this.
Is it, excuse me, is it normal once you receive your bids to reject them or start all over? Is that a good process to set, or?
That's up to council, and we've done it before.
In construction, it's not abnormal for a project to go out to bid and then all bids be disqualified because it exceeded budget.
That's in the real world, but in the city world, is it still proper to do that once you've put a notice in the paper for the bids and things, to have another one come in or do it all over again?
The out that you have is your statement that you reserve the right to accept or reject any and all bids, and to do that which is in the best interest of the city. A bid can always be challenged, and if a bid is challenged, we have to go through a process of reviewing that challenge, because we have, there are legalities that we do have to make sure that we're adhering to.
Is it possible to go back to the three, since the other two were kind of, didn't have everything up like they should have? Would it be acceptable to go back and ask for the, if they could place the lowest bid they could give us, those three?
Absolutely, you certainly can do that. By rejecting the bids, what we typically will find will happen is that the amounts that are bid are now knowledge. I mean, every bidder knows what was bid.
Right, okay.
And they know what they bid, and they know what the others bid.
Right, okay.
All right,
okay.
So
it's out there.
So the process of a sealed bid
Okay.
is kind of gone. But what it does do is it allows the higher bidders to determine whether or not they can do the work at a different amount. Our experience has been, typically if they cannot, they don't rebid.
Right.
They simply do not rebid because they know that someone in the process has already provided a bid at a certain price. Then what we'll typically get is there will be questions relative to the lower bid's ability to do the work at the price that's bid. We give the specifications, they provide, and in this amount, do we require a performance bond?
I think it's below 25,000.
I don't think we are requiring a performance bond on these. So, but typically, a higher bid will question, can the work be done for that amount? Are we bidding apples to apples? Are we bidding the same work? And that really is the reason for the pre-bid conference. We do the pre-bid conference so that we explain to everyone that's interested in bidding the parameters of the project and what is being required in the project. That way they're all hearing the exact same information. Our belief would be we would feel confident that 4 of these 5 have that information. 1 we don't know because we've not had conversation with them concerning the project and what's required of the project, because they did not participate in that.
Yeah.
In the negotiations with Ashmore Brothers, would that agreed upon amount be brought back to council, or it would just be agreed upon and then go from there?
I would ask for clarification of what that, I'm not exactly sure what a negotiated price would be. Is that the lowest that they're willing to do it for? Is that if they're willing to meet the qualified lowest bid? So I would look for some direction of council exactly what that negotiated amount, how that's based.
I think my intent would be the best price that they would be able to give us on it. If 30,000 is it, then, you know, maybe it needs, we would, at that point, would have disqualified all of the bidders. Maybe we would reconsider at that point in time where we wanted to go. I think there's an opportunity here, though, to leverage a relationship with Ashmore Brothers as we talk about road paving issues and repair issues and that sort of thing, to have a dialogue with them about the fact that, you know, maybe the parking lot is part of what they can do for us on an ongoing basis. I mean, it's a local company. Fact of the matter is, probably some of these others are going to buy their asphalt from them anyway, so I just don't see any need for us to, you know, I mean, between the most qualified bidder and Ashmore Brothers, there's only a $2,000 difference. I just don't see that on $30,000 bid that it's that significant. While I certainly agree that we need to be the stewards of our residents' tax dollars and how they're spent, and we're over budget in any regard from any of these bids. I'd like for us to reject the bids and negotiate with Ashmore Brothers. Motion and a second in that regard. Other discussion? Questions? Motion is to reject the bids and authorize the staff to negotiate with Ashmore Brothers to negotiate an agreeable amount for the paving of the operations center. A motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
No.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Bookert,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Slugger. First reading of ordinance 8, 2014, an ordinance to amend the City of Greer Code of Ordinance, Chapter 10, Animals, Article 2, Livestock, by amending Section 1031, Possession of Livestock, and/or adding Section 1032, Raising or Keeping Domesticated Female Chickens. Requested by Councilman Bettis, and we'll let you tee it up from there, sir.
Thank you, sir. Let me just say that I appreciate Ms. Bookert's email with the YouTube video, and it confirmed a lot of things that I've been looking at over the last few weeks, that we're actually a little bit late to this party. It's something that's been going on in a lot of cities and counties for quite a while, and I don't really see a huge downside to it. Looking at the initial ordinance, it looks like it's fairly standard from some others I've seen, and it's a good starting point. We may have to tweak it as we do with all things. But I really believe if you're, you may be a doomsday type person where you're building caves under your house and socking water away, or you may just like to know where your eggs come from. I don't see a real downside to it, and I like the aspect about having approval to put it, that we know where they are and we can keep a check on them so that they're not being mistreated or something bad is happening. So I think it's a good basic ordinance, and I think it's a good idea.
I will assume then that you offer ordinance 8-2014.
I do.
With that, then I'll need a second.
Second?
And the floor is open for discussion.
Well, I just want to say that I know you're going to pass an ordinance so that you can have chickens, but there's already chickens in the community now.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And my thing is, what's going to happen when you have, I know you're setting a number, but, I'm not so sure some people can count, And my thing is, what happens when, 6 becomes 60? And they run out, because they run all over the place now, and they ain't even allowed now, but they run over the place now. Then what happens, how do we deal with that?
Well, we may have to thin out the herd.
Yeah, remember that?
Maybe have a banquet.
You might have a banquet.
No, I believe it'll take. I think it'll take some oversight and a little bit of diligence in keeping up with it. But I think by and large, it'll be a good thing.
Yeah, but I got no problem with somebody wanting to know where the eggs come from. Now, my only problem is 6 becoming 60, or, you know, chickens running all over the place.
I understand, and it's the
Yeah.
same with dogs.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I did verify that the homeowners association, if you live in a community that has a homeowners association, then the covenant and deeds pertaining to that particular neighborhood would override the city ordinance. So if you live in a subdivision that's regulated by a homeowners association and covenant and deeds, then apparently before you could have those chickens, then you would have to go and get your covenants changed to provide for that with an approval of the neighborhood, if I'm remembering that correctly. Is that correct?
Yes, which is not a hard task, that can be done, but yes.
Yeah, and well, I'm kind of with Wayne on it. Sometimes you're kind of afraid things might go overboard, and then the next thing, you know, next step might be the pig, so you'd know where your ham was coming from, or, you know, cow, or whatever. But at least the chickens, if they go by the guidelines that have been set up, and as I read in the ordinance, regulating 50 feet from your next door neighbor, and only have 6, and how to keep the pen clean, and how to dispose of the droppings, and et cetera, et cetera. You know, I guess as long as those items are enforced. But, you know, it seems like it might be, I don't know, maybe one of these things where you may only have a total of 10 people in the city that want chickens, you know.
And we have them now. In my neighborhood, I have 2 neighbors, the ones directly behind me that have chickens, and the ones cat-a-corner in front of me that has chickens. Unfortunately, the coyotes have eaten his chickens, so there's not any chickens anymore. But with our policy, I think that would, or our ordinance, that would allow some things. There was one thing I did see on this one, I think it was in section 10-32, number 2, that the coops have to have a solid floor on them. So I don't know if that can be changed to where it doesn't have to have a solid floor, where it can be an open base, because there's a lot of movable coops where the chickens peck from the dirt, and that's how they get their nutrients and the worms, and they feed off insects and stuff like that. So I don't know if that could be one thing that's addressed, but in its entirety, it's a good policy, and I think it would work.
And then I guess, you know, I kind of think of it as other animals too being kind of pinned up. I know it was mentioned, you know, that it's fun to watch them, but if they're confined in a cage, you really can't do too much watching, because they can't be doing too much in those cages. And it's my understanding they're to stay in the cage. So it's sort of like keeping a dog in a cage all the time, but not having his freedom to get outside.
Yeah, and the video, I don't know how many of you watched Ms. Booker's video, but the movable cage that allowed the chickens to really police up the yard, it's fairly popular, and that may be something we want to look at down the road. But that gives them some exercise, gives them fresh air, and basically what you do is there's no bottom in that thing. You just move them around to certain areas of the yard, and they, like you say, they get their nutrients and get a little exercise. Yeah, they call it something different in that.
It's movable coops.
Yeah.
When is it proper to offer an amendment to the motion?
Now,
I'd like to offer an amendment to the motion that we strike under section 10-32, number 3, where it reads, "It shall be unlawful to slaughter any domesticated female chicken on the premises." I think we should remove that. If we want to know where eggs come from, why don't we know where our chicken legs are coming from?
And I think that was probably added for the children and stuff, with the raising of the chickens on the farms. I don't mind slaughtering. I've definitely seen them slaughtered. I don't know if they want that part in the city. That's a bit much. It's a bit much. I don't know if kids would be ready to see that.
Well, I think probably got at least some reasonable expectation that there might be health issues and different things associated with that as well, too. I don't think it hurt any of our forefathers that they went out and raw the chicken's neck for dinner, but I don't know that we want to,
My grandfather.
you know, I don't know that we want to, I'm sure that we want to open that door. You want to make that as a motion, Mr. Edwards?
Yeah.
Do I
Yeah.
hear a second?
Second.
Now, before we come to discussion, anything else anybody wants to add to that?
I'm kind of on the fence about that. It won't surprise me if it happens, and you don't know about it. I'm not sure we want to condone it.
Definitely happens now, I've seen it.
I mean, I don't understand. We talked about, and this is, you know, no, not trying to be ugly or anything, but we talked about, Ms. Booker was just talking about, well, I don't know if the children are ready for that, but you're wanting to raise farm animals. And part of raising farm animals, I mean, that's what you use farm animals for, is, you know, they are, they're here for the consumption, whether it's their eggs or whether it's their meat. And that's just part of it. That's how it, I mean, if you really want to have the full experience, then don't limit someone to, you know, playing with the birds, basically. I mean,
In other words,
Well, I
you
get
don't
your
want to give
point.
them a nickname, you know?
I mean, you know, because some of the proponents is they don't want additives to come from the feed into the eggs or additives in the meat, which may or may not happen, but you definitely know if there's additives in your meat if you've raised it.
That is true, but we don't have to have them slaughtered right on the front yard of downtown Greer.
Well, how are you going to stop them from slaughtering them anyway if it's my chicken?
We're just going to ask you to take it to the slaughterhouse to go out to the country.
The same way as you asked me not to have a chicken in the first place, but I got one.
That's true.
Got a motion and second. Anybody want to add anything else to this conversation? The amendment is to strike, and you'll have to, excuse me, Mr. Edwards, give me that number again, please, sir.
Section 1032.
1032-3.
1032-3.
Item
A3. yeah.
A3.
Yes.
Motion and second to strike item, or strike section 32, item A3. Motion and second. Any further discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
No.
Mayor Danner.
No.
Motion passes, we may slaughter.
You want to?
Maybe a cottage
Amend
industry.
for open floor? You want to offer an amendment at this point?
To change it to where we can slaughter them?
No.
No.
You just did that.
We just did that, that's done. Do you want to offer an amendment to change the ordinance to include open floors?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll offer an amendment for section 1032-2 to make it where the cooks can have open floors versus having a solid floor.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
For clarification, are we looking to strike the words "with a solid floor"?
Yes, sir, to remove it out, yes, sir,
We're removing those 4 words.
with a solid floor.
It would probably be easier to clean without that. I mean, I don't see very many people going out there and cleaning up that solid floor. Sort of like cleaning up your gerbil cage in your fishbowl.
Yeah, unless they use like the fiber hair, not fiber hairs, there's like a little grass weed thing that some people lay on the bottom of them. But yeah, it will make it easier to clean too.
You're gonna eat them, you want them to be clean. All right, we got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, before we vote on the action of first reading of ordinance 8-2014, do I hear any other amendments this evening? We have a motion and a second in regards to ordinance 8-2014. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
No.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, in executive session, we've got 2 contractual matters to entertain this evening. Do I hear a motion to adjourn to executive session?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. For those of you that are interested, as soon as we return from executive session, we will go into a workshop meeting to discuss our budget. Council, in executive session, we've considered 2 contractual matters, taken no action in regards to either one. Do I hear a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second in that regard. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Arrowood,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Ms. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Ms. Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, having concluded our regular session, we want to move into a called budget workshop. This workshop is convened for the purpose of discussion of our 2014-2015 budget. I'll call the workshop to order with that, and we will proceed. Mr. Driggers?
Thank you. Members of council, what we would like to do this evening, have we distributed them yet? Are they out?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've distributed to your places copies of the budget that we sent to you by email on Friday. We recognize that that this is your first opportunity really to see it in printed form. However, we are prepared to answer any questions that you may have relative to the budget. The intent tonight is to present it to you. We want to do that at a very high level to give you a general overview of the budget and then receive direction from you on how you would like to proceed, how much detail that you ultimately would like to receive with the budget. We have done it a number of ways over a number of years, and quite honestly, I'm not sure that we've ever done it the exact same way any 2 times. And that's not unusual. I think that is because we are a very fluid organization. The circumstances and conditions each year relative to our financial position can vary from year to year. And as I reported to you in my communication on Friday, the really good news is that it is a balanced budget. And the exceptionally really good news is that it does not require any modification to ad valorem tax. It does not require any modification to business license tax, nor to stormwater fees or public service fees. Our recommendation in this budget would be that all of those would remain at their current level, not requiring any types of increases. And I'd place a footnote on that because as we will look at our neighboring municipalities and folks around the state as well as around the country, we have been very fortunate to position ourselves financially that our conservative nature of budgeting previously as well as our ability to rebound from our national recession has well positioned us that growth is maintaining and paying for growth. Can that always be the case? I'm not always certain of that, but it certainly is the case this year as we continue to move forward. So again, what we'd like to do, all of our department heads or representatives of our departments are with us this evening. They'll continue to be with us throughout the process of adopting this budget. We have tonight to look at the overview. You will meet again in a couple of weeks and we can schedule time during that meeting to have some general discussion about the budget. at our first meeting in June, prior to first reading. There is again that opportunity. And then, of course, the public hearing and second reading as we come into the end of June. And of course, there are off weeks during that period as well, that if there is need for additional workshops, we can certainly schedule those as well. So we believe that there is ample time to give thorough review to the process. We have not made these budget documents publicly available yet. We wanted you to have the first review of those, but after tonight's meeting, we will then make those available on our website to representatives of the media and the general public as well. We want our community to be involved in the budget process. We want them to be aware of the resources that are needed to provide the services to our residents, our visitors, and our businesses on a day-to-day basis. But we also know that there needs to be a very intentional process as part of that as well. And again, we think that that begins with you, and that's why you're getting the first review of those. You will notice what we will do tonight, we'll take a look at the funds that are there. We will begin that looking at the revenue and the general fund expenses. Again, we do this differently on a budget by budget basis sometimes. Sometimes it's necessary for us to review the expenses prior to reviewing the revenue, and that's usually because we have expenditures that are greater than our anticipated revenues, and that we are then in a very difficult situation of making very difficult decisions about which of those we pick and choose. We recognize that in this process, what you have before you is a recommended budget. It is my responsibility to provide to you that recommended budget. I have worked with each of our departments. Our departments have worked with their respective staffs. We have met as late as yesterday to review some of those numbers as well, and we are now presenting those to you. As you peruse the budget, as you look through those, we certainly recognize that there may be priorities that we have not addressed, but that would then require that council would offer amendments to the budget. Because again, what we're presenting to you is a balanced budget, and we're presenting that to you as your administrator's recommended budget. It is my belief that we can meet our duties and obligations, our responsibilities to our constituents of July 1, 2014 through June 30th, 2015 with this budget. We have attempted to look at the priorities that you have established through your strategic plan. We've gone back and we have reviewed our notes from your planning session earlier this year. We've identified those things that are priorities that were established through that process, and we've made sure that those priorities that were addressed have been addressed in the budget. Items that were not identified as priorities, you will find either as lesser emphasized in the budget or possibly not emphasized at all in the budget. So again, we tried to use the feedback that you've provided to us, but this now becomes your budget. The staff has prepared it, I have reviewed it, I am presenting it, but it now becomes your budget for review and ultimately to adopt the budget for our next fiscal year. We'll be a bit relaxed in our presentation to you. We want you to be able to ask questions as we work through the process as well. If it addresses issues specific to that which maybe our finance department has worked on, then David or Susan will interject information and have a feedback for that as well. If it's specific to operations within a department, justification of why a request is made, I have that data, but as well our representatives from our departments are here to be able to answer those questions as well. But again, we'll present it on a high level, give you as much information as you would like to have, but it is not our intent this evening to do that on a line item by line item basis. So as you will see, as we approach the general fund, which is what I would like to spend a couple of moments on, general fund for us is budget number 11, but you'll see at the top it'll say general fund, fund 11. You'll see that there are 4 pages of revenues and then 20 pages of expenses. What I would call your attention to, particularly on page 4 of the revenue, is the bottom line, $19,769,005. You will see that above our amended current budget $18,543,403, that is a difference of $1,225,602. That is a 6.6% change in revenue. But what I do want to call to your attention, if you will go to page 2 of those, about 3/4 of the way down on the page, you will see an appropriation called state aid excess appropriation. I'll spend a little more time talking about that. But you'll see a $200,000 entry there. That entry was not made in the last year fiscal budget. So if you adjust for that entry, because typically we would have some type of fund, general fund or fund balance appropriation, by indicating that if you adjust for that $200,000, then the actual increase in revenue, because that's not really an increase in revenue, it's a transfer of how the funds are being allocated. That number then is $1,025,602, which is a much more accurate, truly reflective number at a 5.5% change. And so when we look at what is our growth relative to revenue and expenses, it's really that 5.5%. The good news is that we are anticipating the 5.5% increase in revenues, which is natural growth for us without additional fees, taxes, assessments. Any questions at that point? Okay. Yes.
Where did that addition you were talking about, where did that come from in here?
Okay. Where does it come from, or where is it located in the budget?
In this report?
You will see that on, it says page 2 of 4. This is Fund 11, General Fund. On page 2 of 4, you'll see an entry about 2/3 the way down. It is item 11-4-0335-1-04047, State Aid Excess Appropriation. And I'll give some explanation of what that means and where it comes from. But that's that $200,000 that you see the entry there.
Okay.
And you do not see that it's on the left-hand side of the page. And that's the reason that I'm pointing that out, so to truly compare year to year, we have to adjust that $200,000 as a true comparison. Otherwise, it elevates the number to the 6.6, but it's truly a 5.5. And I wanted to point that out.
So you're not counting that in that total number that you're recommending?
Well, it is included, and
so if we include it, you're saying it's 6.6?
if you include it, it's 6.6.
Gotcha.
It's always there. The difference in the past has been that we have absorbed those dollars into fund balance. I am actually recommending in this budget that you would use those dollars as you've always had the ability to use. But in this point, instead of us doing a fund balance appropriation, I'm recognizing that as excess of state aid. Mr. Edwards, you're really going to understand where this is coming from, because you and I have had a lot of conversation about this. What happens is you have indicated to us a desire to become less dependent on state aid, local government fund, because we constantly have a battle. Every year you're getting information from the Municipal Association about the difficulty of the appropriation for state aid. Well, we've been very fortunate that as our population has increased, and while there has been an overall reduction in state aid statewide, for Greer, our numbers have maintained and have continued to be good. But because it's become a less reliable source of income, we have made a very intentional decision to reduce that by 10% a year. So when you look at the number above that, where it says state aid, you will see that last year we budgeted at $375,000. Well, we actually collected $550,000 in the previous year. We're already at $432,000, and we're estimating that we're going to finish the year at about $628,000. So those are dollars that are coming to us, but they are less reliable and less predictable. What you have said to us in the past is those dollars do come into us, but let's very intentionally designate non-recurring operational expenses to use those dollars for. so that whether that's for capital equipment purchases or again, non-recurring expenses. You will find later in the budget as an expense, what I am suggesting to you is that the two line items, street paving and sidewalk repair and replacement, that is what those dollars are being identified and directed toward. So that we know we have use of those dollars. We don't use them for things like rent, salaries, gasoline, insurance, those recurring expenses. It gives us the ability that if for some reason those dollars were to stop immediately, we do not interrupt the delivery of service. We would reduce our level of paving until we are able to adjust for that, but it would not interrupt our operations. And that's what I believe I've heard from you in that process, is identify how those dollars could be used, but not to rely on them for recurring expenses. That is why you are seeing it presented the way that it is. We anticipate the dollars are going to come in. We just want to reduce our dependency on those dollars. And so we have reduced it by 10% as a line item for state aid. We're simply identifying now $200,000 of those dollars in overage to be used exclusively for, and again, we'll show that in the expense side, for street paving and for sidewalk repair and replacement. That's where that is showing.
Thank you.
So if we look at revenues, kind of looking on page 1 of 4, again, from a high level, what you'll start to see is we've got budgeted this year $9,344,000. You're seeing that we're projecting about $9,704,000 in the coming year. We are anticipating that we will finish this year at about $9,494,000, so about $9.5 million. We're projecting about $200,000, $205,000, $206,000 in natural growth to tax-based growth. We think that that's a very realistic number for us moving forward. Franchise license and fees, again, from a budget perspective, you see that we're at $5,302,000 for the current year budget, projecting that to go to $5,931,000. We feel very comfortable with that number. We are anticipating coming in at $5,835,000 this year. So you can kind of see a pattern in what we're projecting in growth relative to ad valorem taxes, business license fees, those types of things. Miscellaneous revenues, 203 to 229, no large increases there. Permits, fees, you're starting to see some growth there relative to permit fees, inspection fees, building fees, those types of things. So if you follow those down through the different fees that are associated, all permits and fees, last year about 433, we're expecting that number to go to about 482. Again, not a large substantial increase. Intergovernmental revenues, 836 this year, projecting those at 1,031,500. Of particular note there was what we're doing with state aid and then applying $200,000 of that state aid to a direct expense, but a non-recurring expense. Fire fees, no real big differences there. 365 to 366, I mean $1,000.
What?
I'm sorry?
On fire fees on
Yes, sir.
East Greer Fire District, why are we estimating 171? I mean, is that not a set fee? And then we're going to be dropping for next year.
What can happen in that, and we don't always know exactly what can fluctuate those numbers. It should stay rather constant. But what can happen is because we're receiving that's coming off of property tax in that area, you could have delinquent property taxes that are paid from one year to the next that could make it go up or down a little bit. But we don't always know that those are being applied from delinquent property taxes. We're receiving it as ad valorem tax. David, solely, is that, or any additional explanation on that?
Yes, sir. It is pretty constant.
Yeah. But that's the reason you'll see that. I mean, we could have projected it at 171 because that's where we're projecting to be. But we're at 144 now. We finished up the year last year at 164, 190. We just think the 165 is close to where it'll come in. You'll notice, I did want to call your attention to police fines and forfeitures. You'll see a larger change there. We were at budget this year at 234. We're already at 216. Extrapolating that out through June 30th, we believe those numbers are going to come in at about 282. And we are, and with our discussions with the police department and the activity they have there, the officers that are in place and us being back fully staffed on that side, we are anticipating that number should be able to come back at about 293. It can fluctuate. Things can happen. If we had 3 or 4 uniform officers that were to leave us during the year and we run and we do less traffic control measures, that number could shift. But based on where we are and the emphasis that we've seen placed there, we think that is a realistic number. So all fines and forfeitures, really about 295 this current year, going to about 396, and that's a pretty major change that's there. You see some change in grants, but it stays pretty constant as we kind of go down to about the middle part of that page. And then operating transfers will call for a larger amount, $970,000 in the current budget, $1,056,461. Those operating transfers, particularly in that one on hospitality, we dedicate a percentage of hospitality resources to operational expenses as allowed for by state statute for the operation of those facilities. So you'll see a change in that from year to year. So that's where you're seeing the $18,543,403. I'm on page 404. That's the current budget as proposed at $19,769,005. Again, whether you adjust or not, but that with the $200,000 included, it puts us at a 6.6 change in revenue. If you were to adjust for that, it puts you at a 5.5. But those are the revenue numbers that we believe we should anticipate in the next fiscal year. I'll defer now to David or Susan. Any additional comments or anything that you may be aware of that we might want to particularly identify on revenue?
The only thing in this item is obviously it's what we say every year. Municipal Association business license, it doesn't come in until June 26th.
Yeah.
It's unknown at this point.
Yeah. We're not aware of any significant changes that we should anticipate from them. There always are some shifts, but sometimes one goes up, one goes down. But there's no litigation that's out there. There's no settlements that's being negotiated with them that we are anticipating any type of large shift there. So it's to the best of our ability based on prior year. This is what we're projecting. But David is absolutely correct. We have no real numbers on that which is remitted to us from the Municipal Association until the last week of the fiscal year. I wish that was different, but we struggle with that each and every year because it's an unknown for us. Any questions at this point relative to revenue? It is our best guess. It is the methodologies that we use to project for year end this year versus what we would anticipate collecting. All of those are in place. I will tell you that we are conservative. We are conservative by nature because we believe that the worst thing that we could do would be to over anticipate revenue and then plan to spend the money. We would rather be conservative on our spending side, have excess revenues come in, and then you make a decision about how you would like to use those versus the other way around. The other way, we have to make mid-year cuts to our expenditures, and we have just found that being much more conservative on the revenue side has fared well for us more times than not than doing the opposite. Okay.
I like the idea about cutting back on that state aid too, because each year they seem to be cutting that more and more and more. It's getting hard to budget out.
It's a harder battle each year, and we are now in about our 4th year of cutting 10%. So we're rolling that back each year, and we will take prior year, not collection.
Yeah.
And we made a very conscious decision to not say, let's take what's collected and reduce it by 10%. We are making a very intentional, so over time, you will actually see state aid at zero. And then there will be an entry for what we would anticipate would come in, but we're not appropriating it again to recurring expenses. It then, over time, will allow you a greater capacity to look at capital projects, whether that's street paving, construction projects, whatever those may be. We're recognizing that that's where those dollars ultimately get channeled more toward capital and non-recurring. And so that's what we're trying to do with that by reducing that 10% a year. Okay, very good. If we could then, we'll look at general fund expenditures, and I will do those on a department by department basis. You'll see on page 1 of 20, Mayor and Council, very, very small change there, from budgeted 172,463 to 180,505. Very, very few changes that are reflected in that. I will say that while it is not included in this budget because it was not directed to us as part of developing this budget, I would again encourage council to look at compensation for mayor and council as compared to other municipalities of similar sizes and similar budgets. We have not made adjustments to compensation for our elected officials for quite some time. I think it is appropriate that that should be done. I think it's appropriate that we would review that. We are proposing in our study, in our budget this year, that we're doing a compensation and classification review. We will include our elected officials in that comp and class study. And I would encourage us, again, as we continue to move forward, that we give very serious consideration to adjustments that may need to be made there long-term for the city, whether it's you sitting in your seats or it's someone else sitting in those seats. When you do not make adjustments for a long period of time, they get way out of line with, again, other similar-sized cities, municipalities with similar-sized responsibilities and budgets. And I just simply plant that seed and say, while we have not done that at this point, it will be included in our proposed comp and class study, and I would hope that you would give serious consideration to that when that study is completed, to reviewing that and giving some open consideration to that. But it's not there now. Next, city administration, you'll see that that number goes from a budgeted number of $1,605,878 to $1,701,625. I will pause at this moment because you will notice that any type of increases across the board, that you're mostly going to see those either in compensation, benefits, insurance, and then as we get to the general government expenses, some of our debt items that are there. What we have done across the board with all of our positions is I am recommending to council that you consider a 3% increase to the budget. That 3% increase is not a cost of living allowance. It is to be included as a merit evaluation. We would budget up to 3% for all positions. We would award no greater than 3%, but it will be based on the prior performance evaluation for all employees. So therefore, we would anticipate that an employee who is meeting or exceeding expectations would be eligible for and would receive a 3% increase. Employees that have had any type of performance issues or concerns may receive anything from 0 up to no greater than 3%. But we would not anticipate performance issues or concerns reaching that level. What our desire and what we believe we've heard from you is that merit-based is what is our highest desire, to reward our employees who are our highest performing employees. Again, we are proposing that we would do a compensation and classification analysis this year. We've not done that for 15 years. We believe that by making a an adjustment to our scales of that 3%, that it will better position us as we look at a comp and class study. We had a couple of years that we were unable to award any type of increases, and then we were more contained to what was considered CPI prior to that and consequent to that. And so the 3% gets us a bit above what would be CPI, but I believe it would still show, when we do our comp and class study, I believe that we're going to show across the board that our scale is a little bit lower than where we would desire for it to be, but by including the 3% now, I think it makes it a much more achievable goal for us when we receive that analysis moving forward. So across the board, you'll see that we budgeted 3%. Some employees would receive 3, some could get 0, some could get a half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. But the intent again there is to reward at the highest level those employees that are performing at the highest level. Any employee that is not performing at that desired level would receive a lesser amount or may receive 0. It will be merit-based. In our numbers as well this year, there are some modifications based on the number of employees that we have, whether or not they may have employee-only insurance or whether or not they may have employee family coverage. We are not proposing an increase to the allocation to the overall fund. The fund has operated very well this year. We will have a small surplus in the fund, and you know, as you know, for us, surplus is not what we desire in that. But we are anticipating that we'll finish the year based on our claim history with a small surplus in our insurance fund. That gives us some flexibility in that fund, that if our claims are a little bit higher next year, we've got a little more room to absorb those claims. So we are not recommending an increase that would be passed along either to us as the employer or to our employees for dependent coverage. We believe that based on our renegotiation with our insurance this year, that we can maintain those costs. And that's really good news for us. In an environment that healthcare costs are continuing to rise, for us to be able to contain our costs is good news, and we do believe that we're in a position to be able to do that. There are some modifications that you'll find from department to department, then relative to property and liability insurance coverage. A couple of things have happened with that, and also with workers' compensation. As you know, we are evaluated and receive credits. We have an experience modifier on both of those insurance programs relative to liability and property coverage and workers' comp. The better we do and the better that we perform, the more opportunity we have to reduce those premiums. Well, because they're evaluated on a 3-year window, we will now have experience modifiers over 1.0, which means we receive no discounts relative to those programs. And so we are having to budget for those. So for our employees this year, we already know that there will not be a safety bonus come October, and because there's nothing to share. There is no savings that we're going to have in workers' compensation. We're going to be having to fund that fully, and when there are no savings, there's nothing that we're able to come back and share with our employees on that. So we already know that. The return of excess credits that are given to us both by workers' compensation and by property and liability, we are anticipating that there will be refunds made to us in what they call return of excess. But because they do that now as a check, they actually we will pay our premium, and then if there is a return of excess, they write a check back to us. It is necessary for us to fund that fully, and then if those refunds are made available to us, then they're simply deposited into the general fund of the city, and those then go back to fund balance or however they would ultimately be recorded. But we are required to make the payment. So as part of that process in both our SMRF and SMIT programs through the Municipal Association, because that's how they have implemented the program, we have a responsibility to fund it fully, and you'll see that that has happened as well. So as we work through the budgets, you will see that the primary change that you would see under, whether it's administration or courts or police or fire, short of there being any recommendations for any type of change in staff, then that's where you're seeing those numbers. And so, so we come back now to administration. When you see that there is a change on page 3 of 20 of $1,605,878 to $1,701,625, there are no additional staff positions that are there. There was one that was recommended. Actually, that was in building development standards, not in administration. We made no recommendations that are there. We're moving some dollars around relative to some part-time work that we have for both IT and for some internship work, but we're not adding any positions there as well. So I want to make sure the council was aware of that. Any questions? And again, we'll drill that down as we continue to move forward, and we'll always come back. As we continue to move forward, municipal court is another department. There are no recommendations for increases to positions or for staffing levels within the department. That's a department budget on page 5 of 20, 591,966 to 605,115. Very in line with minor modifications that are there. Again, we will go back and answer any questions relative to line items that you may have. General government operations is much more detailed. There's a lot of things that go through that budget, but as you will see, as that concludes on page 8 of 20, $3,967,894 to $4,466,201. Some of the more significant changes that you may see there is us modifying how we are recording some of our street lighting, but we believe that we'll spend the same amount of money next year that we're spending this year. We will anticipate that as we do complete our lighting program on Highway 29, all of the dollars for the installation of that project are covered under other revenue resources. We are anticipating that the operational cost of those will be equal to what we are currently paying. That could have a little larger increase, but by the time they're installed, we'll have another year to really kind of measure that. But that's one of the larger items that's out there.
That, I think that answered my question. The $475, almost $500,000, that's for operation of streetlights.
That is actually the metered use of the lights.
Okay.
We appropriate about $20,000 for installation. The way that they bill us, that's always really included in that number. We made a decision this year to take that line item out, not to have it separate, because when they bill us, it's included in the bill, and we don't really have the ability to separate it out. So we think it's more accurate to include it as well. And so the number has worked for us at the $475. If we add a lot of extra lights that aren't out there today, that number could go up. But what we're hoping is that when we do the Highway 29 project, and that's where we're going to see the most new lights, we're hoping that the efficiency that we realize there, that even though we may add lights, we hope that our metered use of those lights is less for the increased efficiency that we should recognize there. So that's the reason we're not proposing any increase at this time to that line item. One of the larger increases that you would see this year is under rent. That's the Greer Trust. You'll see that we were budgeted $1,359,848. We're recommending that go to $1,513,455. We are at the peak of our ramp up for Greer Trust.
We're close, but not quite.
So we're at the higher end of what our ramp up would be for that. So
What does it go to next? When do we start on the downward slope?
good question.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah. So we ramped it up to be able to get, to absorb it as we got to this point. It fluctuates a little bit based on the debt schedule, but we're really at, the higher end of that. The dollars can change some, but they will not be significant. We don't anticipate.
Next year is anticipated, is scheduled for an additional 20,000. And the year after that is 75.
Yeah. But at $1 million,
It's put you in the million.
yes, but at $1.5 million, that then
Million
takes.
six, and we started
In 2 years.
in 2 years at one.
In 2 years, it goes up to about $1.6 million. Pull that out.
Over the $1.5 million, 13 that we're where we are this year.
How much is left on it?
How many years?
It goes to 2025, I think. Just 1 second. 2027, that will be paid off. The high point will be $1,624,000.
In 2 years?
Correct.
In 2 years. Yeah. Very manageable for us
Then
as
it
we've
starts
got
stepping down, correct?
and then we'll start to see some step down.
Yeah.
Okay? Those are some of the property insurance, as I was mentioning earlier. That's the reason you're seeing it from 195 to 255, because we have to fund it fully. But we are hoping that there will be a return of surplus, that we'll again start to see some dollars returned back to us on that as well. Others are pretty much in line with what we've seen before. Special contracts from 135 to 173. There are, one of those is the comp and classification study. That is $35,000, but that is a one-time expenditure. Again, we've not done a comp and class for 15 years. We felt that it was very important for us to try to get that included in this year's budget. The other larger one, and I just drew a blank, David, can you help me? There was comp and class and...
The personnel, public safety.
And the other was the evaluation for fire and police, for us to do a staffing and operational study. There will be a portion of that we will need to pay. Another portion, we're budgeting that at 60-40, that we would be able to use confiscated funds on the police side for that study. But the fire department side of that, we would need to fund, and we've appropriated $20,000 for that. But that is a complete review and analysis of operations and staffing for both police and fire, and us funding 40% of that study. So those are the two largest ones. Those were truly the larger. Fund balance reserve, that's 185 to 198. That simply changes because the value of the mill changes. That is our return replenishment to fund balance. We will again, at the conclusion of this fiscal year, once we have our audited statements, we would then come back to council, and once you have attained that fund balance level that you believe is where you want to be, and you've at that percentage or dollar amount, that's at that point is where we would either recommend a rollback or a complete elimination of the additional millage for fund balance appropriation. That's those dollars that we talked about during your planning retreat. But those are included, and those go right back to your fund balance. So again, $3,967,894 to $4,466,201 under general government. Fire department, there was a request by the fire department for us to add 3 additional firefighter positions. I am recommending in this budget that we would appropriate funds for 1. Last year's budget requested 3. We appropriated 1. This year's budget requested 3, and I'm recommending again 1. I would anticipate that next year, either through grant or recommendation, that there would be a similar recommendation to do that. We are trying to get us to the point so that we can, 1, honor our commitment to our Pelham-Batesville contract to be able to provide the staffing level that's required under that contract. I think that's a priority for us. And then the other is, as we are trying to not add additional staff, but what we're trying to maintain, what we're trying to recognize is that under our current level, that we would be able to have a reliability of 10 firefighters per shift. It's 10, right, Chief?
By the time you ramp up next year, we'll have 10 at minimum staff.
10 at minimal staffing level. That's the minimal staffing level is what we're trying to achieve. The ramp up allows us to accomplish that incrementally. The other thing that I am appropriating, or I'm requesting to be appropriated in this budget, are dollars that we would put into either what we would refer to as overtime, which is a little bit of a misnomer because it's very hard for our fire department staff to be able to get to the threshold under Fair Labor Standards Act to be eligible for overtime. But we do have this issue of because of absenteeism, and that's not a negative connotation for absenteeism, but because of sick and or vacation, when we drop below that 10-person staffing level, we're trying to develop a strategy of how do we bring people in, especially during our peak periods, so that we're able to have that level of that 10 firefighter level on staff, even though we may have folks that are on vacation, holiday, or sick. This budget appropriates about $33,000 in a line item for us to use either to bring in firefighters from outside our organization to assist us with that staffing level, or for us to have dollars for compensation for folks to maintain that level as well. While I am asking that those dollars be earmarked in the budget, I would not use any of those dollars until we have completed our evaluation for staffing, manpower, and operations through the ICMA police and fire study before we would implement any of those dollars. But I would hope that we would get that program going, that study implemented this fall, and I do anticipate that there could be then some recommendation of how we would maintain that staffing level. I want to appropriate the dollars, but I don't want to start spending them until we've done that complete analysis moving forward. So I'm just kind of placeholding those until that study is completed, is my recommendation. There was another recommendation within the fire department, and I believe it was a legitimate recommendation, and that was for us to reevaluate our stipend or our incentive that we provide for medical levels for our firefighters. In reviewing that within area departments in the upstate, we found that in many cases we were very low. We found in some cases that we were competitive. There were a few minimal cases that we were exceeding. But across the board, it certainly looked that when we compared salary to the medical incentive and what we were asking of our firefighters relative to those different levels, I'm requesting in this budget that we would appropriate $12,500 that allows us to make some revision to that medical incentive pay. And that is spread across the board within the department for those firefighters, engineers, officers that have attained that level of certification. And Chief, that would be paramedic.
Paramedic, intermediate, and basic.
Yeah, basic, paramedic, and intermediate for those levels. So those dollars are included here as well. Trying to see if there are any line items that were noteworthy of rather significant changes. But that's where you see the largest there. Fire service contracts, you will see a shift there from $230,000 to $290,000. We are holding there are some increase, there's some minor increase that we have just as a matter of CPI to our existing contracts, but we are also placeholding dollars there for our Bowling Springs contract that we have not yet negotiated, but we're placeholding dollars for that as indicated by council earlier, our desire to do that. So that's why you're seeing the biggest change there. That's so we can negotiate that contract with them. So total $2,746,862 to $3,169,332. volunteer firefighters on page 11 of 20, you see we're actually seeing some decrease there. We have fewer volunteers today than we've had in the past. We're finding fewer opportunities or need. But our volunteer fire program is still in place. We hope that that's a line item we don't have much need for, but we do have to have dollars that are available for it. We have learned as early or as late as today, there are some changes that we're going to have to implement relative to some IRS requirements of how we record those dollars to our volunteers. IRS is now indicating that that must be included as compensation, not as stipend.
Right.
So we're going to have to make some changes to that. It should be minor.
President, didn't we change one time and then have to change back? Weren't we paying it?
We were,
Many years ago, it was paid as income. And it was changed and paid as a stipend. And then it
Per
was
diem.
changed back to as income, correct?
Correct. Yeah, no, I was at a conference today, and the gentleman there was from the IRS, and was addressing multiple compensation issues, but that was one of them.
So we're still the same. I mean, there's no changes for us, right?
We are presently doing it through stipends, per diems,
Training.
1099s.
Right.
It'll have to roll over to W-2.
They're requiring us to do it as W-2s.
I don't know, I'm out of that, but the last time I received compensation, it was on W-2. Is that correct, Chief?
Yeah, I think we're already doing it.
Yeah, because we changed and now it's just come back.
A couple of years ago, we changed back to start doing it as W-2s.
Okay, then we're doing it correctly now.
So we're in compliance. Yay!
That's good.
Yay. Doesn't affect the dollars. We just want, the point being, we want to make sure that we're in compliance with IRS rules and regulations. Very good. Good. It's always good to be in compliance. Police, I'm sorry. Yeah. Police, when you look on page 13 of 20, $5,103,522, $5,341,767. There was a request within the police department for us to do a couple of within grade adjustments. Those seem to be justified and legitimate. They don't have any real significant change or impact to us as we evaluate individuals' jobs and performance and their duties and responsibilities. Some people have taken on more responsibility. So we're needing to take a look at that. We will be able to confirm that through the comp and class study. The police department made a recommendation that we would take a part-time position in criminal investigations and move it to full-time. I am not recommending that in the budget. This is a position that we added last year. My feedback back to the department was if we created the position last year, I probably need a little more than 1 year to evaluate the workflow. Again, the comp and class study will help us with that. Very willing to revisit that as we move forward, but that was a recommendation that was made by the department that I had not included in my proposal to you. There is a recommendation to add a uniform patrol officer. I am including that in my recommendation. So this budget does include the adding of one additional uniform patrol officer. There was also a request by the department for us to add a detective in our criminal investigations division. I am not making that recommendation to you at this time. Again, I'd like to complete the comp and class study as well as the police and fire. Thank you. The police and fire analysis on staffing levels and workflows before we would make that decision as well. So this budget does not include that. And I think that was the recommendation there. So, but again, adding one uniform patrol.
Under
Yes, sir.
We've got $4,500 budget for ammunition.
Yes, sir.
And so let's count bullets. But when we go out, when that ammunition is purchased, do we look at local vendors as well, or who are we going through?
I do not know the answer to that, but I bet there's a couple of folks here who do.
We do look for local vendors. We also go based off state contract. We'll check with Palmetto, Shooter's Tools, Sharpshooter, it's on. We have bought some from them. They were able to give us at a cheaper price. We do compare prices. It's just when we buy it with state contract, it takes so long. We ordered back in July, and we're still waiting on it to come in. It's about a 1-year turnaround right now.
You know, we have a vendor in the city, so we'll be checking with them too.
Absolutely.
The new line item for $15,000 professional services, $650. $15,000 requested and approved.
Okay.
Page 13.
Yes, they are recommending that we would reevaluate and consider accreditation. That is the startup dollars for the accreditation process. Is it CALEA? This would be CALEA. We were accredited by CALEA for a number of years. We dropped that accreditation, and we did it primarily for financial reasons. We've stabilized significantly to our finances. I see great value to accreditation. I'd like to see both our police and fire departments as accredited public safety agencies. The department believes that they have existing staffing to be able to do that, but there are dollars that are necessary for the program. I will say that is solely my recommendation. I respect that if accreditation isn't our desire, it is easily a $15,000 item that we could remove. But that is its purpose, is for CALEA national accreditation. Boarding and lodging, you see, we see a bit of a decrease there. We're glad to be able to do that. Being able to manage housing of prisoners and getting them out of the Greenville side quicker. That's a cooperative effort between both courts and police, but there's been some good success there. It's not significant dollars, but we like seeing it go down. Let's see if there are any other line items of significant note. No, those, not really. Any questions relative to police or anything to add? Brandon, anything that relative to that? Good. Public services made no request for any additional staffing. Therefore, we don't see really any significant changes there. You actually see a decrease across the board for them on salaries. And that's because of younger folks moving into positions that more senior folks had previously. So that's worked well for us. Total for them, $1,406,815, and you see that they are at $1,342,712. Love to see all of our departments have that type of adjustment. But they've been able to manage their costs extremely well, and we believe that the resources are there for them to be able to do the job necessary. Skipper, any concerns or issues or anything that you would like to address there? Because yours is kind of the anomaly. I mean, it's going down. Okay. Very good. Questions? Okay. As we move to page 16, Recreation Department. Ann's always going to recommend more votes. And Ann always needs more folks because there is a growing demand for the services within her department as well. There were a couple of recommendations relative to staff within the department. One of those was asking us to replace a grounds supervisor's position that was established when we built these properties and added City Park and City Hall and the parking lots. We had a position that was there during our most severe budget constraints. It was a position that we eliminated. And I think it was actually a layoff situation. We had a person in that position, we eliminated the position, and we were forced to lay off a person in that. There was a need then as we brought these properties online, and that need has continued. But we do believe that we're financially positioned now that we can try to get that position back. And I am recommending to you that we would reestablish, or it's really create, because it hasn't been in a holding pattern, it's create that position for a ground supervisor to assist with the maintenance of our properties citywide. They would be utilized both here at City Park, the parking lots downtown, and all of our park facilities as well. It would be assisting the superintendent in that division with those duties and responsibilities. That is a working supervisor position, so they are on the crew and they are with that crew as well. That is recommended. And also made some recommendations that we would create a part-time rec leader position, and also recommended that we would add some additional part-time hours to about 6 of her part-time positions. I think it was about 6 of those part-time positions. What I have come back to Ann and indicated is that I would recommend to council that we would appropriate the dollars for the rec leader position, but giving her the flexibility to recognize that if her greater need is in the part-time hours rather than the rec leader position, that we give her the flexibility to use those dollars where it can best be utilized. So I haven't really kind of gone back to her yet to say which is it going to be. It's a matter of if the dollars are appropriated, again, giving the flexibility within the department, and then once that decision is made, we will plug that in internally, but it would not have an effect in changing the numbers. It would be salary benefit dollars that are there. This is a department where we have found great benefit in using part-time labor. We will acknowledge that finding reliable, consistent, qualified part-time is very difficult, and it's a challenge, and it is a challenge in any of our departments. But we do have substantial savings to our positions by using part-time when and where we can, because we're not paying benefits to those positions. So we recognize that we try to maintain our part-time levels at 28 hours or less. That keeps us under the threshold on those part-time positions of providing full-time benefits. Because typically if we do, we add about 12,000. Was that the number in benefits? We add about 12,000.
For everything?
Yeah. Well, with the taxes, fees, and workers' comp and everything, but yeah. So it has a significant change for us from part-time to full-time. So we try really hard. But again, as a matter of information, we make you aware that is an extremely, those of you, if you're in business and you have to hire part-time help, you know that it's hard to find consistent, qualified part-time labor. But they do a good job with it. Some of it's more seasonal, and they manage it. But they'd love to take 4 part-times and make them into 2 full-times, but we don't. And so and task me with that yearly, but they do a good job of managing that. And relative to the department, are there any significant areas of change for you that you would like to note? As I look through the budget, those are not, utilities are going up a little bit for her this year. We're not anticipating any large change, but what we're not anticipating as well are significant changes in programming. And because we're not changing the programming, we're not really changing the fields that we light and when we light them and those types of things. So no real significant changes there. We have those dollars in the hospitality budget, and we'll take a look at those. Yes, hospitality is where those are.
I see what she's got, what she requested, 48,000 for bicycle and walking pass. What does that entail?
$48,000 in the bicycles, pedestrian, for the plans.
That's the PCAP grant that we applied for. We have a $8,000 match. I'm asking for $40,000 on, that's not right.
Greenville area transportation plan, Greenville Pickens area transportation plan, KeyPass.
So I'm hoping that we get that grant to be able to use some of that funding for the trail plan development. We're also applying for the land and water conservation grant, so we're applying for as much as we possibly can.
Mr. Griffin, help me find the line item you're, oh, I see, yes, but notice, there's zeros beside it.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
wondering.
that was her request.
Yeah.
Because it is, it's an unknown at this point, very similar to the Soil and Water Conservation Grant. If there's the likelihood that we can apply and get those funds, I think that's an item that we would most likely come back to you and ask for an appropriation to do that versus a budget line item as an unknown at this point. I was uncomfortable in tying up $48,000 now for what may or may not occur. So that's the reason that I'm not recommending it here. I'm encouraging Ann to continue to look for grant resources for those types of studies. Yeah. Yeah, you confused me because I was going, I didn't remember approving that. Very good. Building and development standards. They have made some recommendation to increase the hours of a part-time building inspector within that department. I think that is a good approach. We will anticipate that as we are continuing to see more residential and commercial development, that there will be more inspections for us to actually conduct. Utilizing part-time labor for that as we ramp up, I think is very wise. I think there will be a point in time, I would hope that there's a point in time that we continue, that our development continues at a level that's actually a position that we may need to add. We eliminated a building inspector's position when the volume decreased, and instead of adding the position when we have incremental increase, we're actually looking at doing that by increasing some part-time labor. And so that would appropriate up to 28 hours for that position, and I think that would be very helpful. Because we are utilizing that position primarily for building inspection, it then gives us a need more for the seasonal assistance for nuisance abatement, and there are some dollars appropriated for part-time labor for seasonal assistance there as well. But again, using part-time labor. I'm trying to remember the dollar amount because we had $8,000. It was about $8,000 that was there. So we again, using the part-time labor worked for us very well. Building development standards from 909, 943, 948, 188. No real significant changes there in line items outside of what would have been affected there.
How did, on line item 11.5, it's computer maintenance.
Okay.
Went to like $10,000.
We went from, we actually spent $81 and we're budgeting $10,000.
Actual year to date is $81. We budgeted this year $1,800 and asking to appropriate $10,000. Thank you. That is a very good question. There's a change there, and David's got some information on that.
As we're doing more of the GIS, a large portion of that's going to be the increased fees for our GIS program and the server maintenance required for that.
The employee that we have that is the GIS operator, we now have purchased equipment for them. This is utilizing that equipment and the software that ultimately will be required. We've purchased additional software this year for inventory as well. We want to make sure that we're starting to inventory all of our sidewalks, all of our streets. We want to inventory all of our storm drainage system, our manhole covers, all of that asset management would be incorporated as part of the GIS, identifying what it is and where it's located. This gives us the ability to have the software to do that. Other questions on that? So with building and development standards, again, that takes us for a total budget currently $18,543,403 to $19,769,005. General, or specific, but general questions or issues at this point, and we certainly know you reserve the right to come back for additional information at any time, but anything at this point relative to the general fund. It's the one that gets the most attention. It's where most of our dollars are in and out. Very good. As part of the general fund, we do have special funds that are required for us to look at. One of the expenditures that we have in the general fund is paying debt for capital items and lease purchase. I've asked both David and Mike to provide us with some additional information relative to our lease purchase program. I'm going to actually start that off with Mike because I wanted to give you an update this year of how we are evaluating our vehicle fleet. One of the things that we have certainly recognized is that a large expenditure for us over time is the purchase of vehicles. Those can be $1 million fire trucks and $30,000 police cars and $40,000 dump trucks and $25,000 passenger vehicles. But when we put all of those together from an asset perspective, we have a great investment in those assets. We are evaluating those, we are scrutinizing those at a much different level now. I have assigned that task to Mike, in that one, to make sure that our first objective in evaluating our fleet is what I asked of our departments was that I wanted to do a reduction in our overall fleet of 10%. I wanted to reduce our fleet by 10%, and we've been able to achieve that. And we've been able to achieve that by really recognizing what was referred to previously more as spare vehicles. But spare vehicles can have a great cost to us. We insure them, we operate them, we keep tires on them, we do all those things, but we don't always have the greatest return for that investment. So we've been able to eliminate many of those vehicles, and then we've also implemented a program of how we are deadlining vehicles that need to come out of our fleet and the process for replacing those when it's most appropriate to do that. So Mike, if you would share with us some information on our fleet management program and our proposal for purchasing of vehicles in the next budget.
We discussed a little bit of this during the retreat, and we did want to provide some additional information in regards to those efforts. One of the things that we found as we started to take a look at it, when Mr. Rivers came and we talked about what we had that was possibly excess vehicles, was that our reduction of vehicles, or disposition of vehicles, did keep up with what we were experiencing in like 2008, 2009, when we were reducing staff and when we were holding on budgeting for positions. So reviewed the entire fleet from top to bottom in conjunction with the department heads to find out, where do we have the excess vehicles and what can we get rid of. We started the process, Mr. Rivers came to me, it was actually March of last year, and we started the process at the time. At that time, we had about 148 vehicles in our inventory. And in sitting down with each department heads and reviewing their positions, reviewing the needs that they had in the department, we began to identify that the 10% mark was within line with what we probably would take a look at reducing. We were real successful in getting rid of a lot of overstock, things that we did not, that weren't being used, that were basically kind of sitting there collecting dust. We went from 148 vehicles to a standing count at this time of about 134, so actually a little bit more than a 10% reduction. What we're currently right now, because when we began the process, we went through a gov deal auction where we disposed of I think it was about 14 vehicles. And of course, over this past year, we have acquired vehicles that were in the current budget that we're in right now. That brought us up to what we currently have at 146, a difference of 2 vehicles. We have 12 vehicles right now that are scheduled for a gov deal auction early June. And we've got those vehicles redeemed and ready to go, so that'll bring us down to that number of 134. And taking a look at what our needs are, what we decided to do is we wanted to make sure that we looked at our inventory to see what are our older vehicles, what are the vehicles that are either have a lot of miles, a lot of wear and tear, costing us a lot of maintenance, and how can we best dispose of them. And looking at what we start to take a look at too is, when is the appropriate time to get rid of a vehicle? I mean, do you wait till the wheels are falling off of it and you gov deal it and you get $800 for it, or do you try to back that up a little bit and send it out the door a little quicker so that we can get a higher return on the investment? And of course, it's all about the rate of return. From when we buy the vehicle, how we use it, the maintenance that we spend over time, the fuel that we put in it, and then what those costs are for what we can get out of it when we finally dispose of the vehicle. Right now, we're putting together a program that's going to allow us to track that very specifically on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis, so we'll know what those exact costs are. We are beginning a process of where we've identified a number of vehicles that we probably would have let go for another year. But we decided that in looking at this budget, that we had the capacity in the capital budget to add vehicles, but we were going to move some vehicles, start to give us a baseline to say, okay, 2 years ago, we sent a vehicle out, the police department's a good example. It had 75,000 miles, or say 80,000 miles on it, and it was 6 years old. And we got X amount of dollars out of that vehicle in a gov deal auction. And for whatever various reasons, the condition of the vehicle may influence that. If we back that up and we add 5,000 less miles, or we subtract 5,000 less miles, and we get rid of that vehicle 1 year sooner, or in some cases with the police department, it's actually about 12,000 miles. We put the most miles, obviously, on our police cars than any other vehicle in the fleet. What is that going to get us? We go from $2,000 in the gov deal auction to $2,500, we go to $3,000, we go to $3,500. What's that return? But we need to get that idea, so we need some experience. So we're doing that this year. We're going to move some vehicles out of our inventory. There's a couple in there that's got a lot of miles, like 108, 110,000 miles that we would normally get rid of at this time anyway. There are a few vehicles that are closer to that 70,000 mile mark that traditionally we may try to milk another year out of it. And we're going to try to get some idea of what that return is so that we can help start making a determination when the appropriate time to get rid of vehicles are. Before I talk about what's in this particular budget, we also start taking a look at alternative fuel options. One of the things that we found is that there's not a lot of good places in our inventory to put an alternative fuel vehicle, mainly because of the cost involved with that vehicle. What we have found is that if you start calculating out the price of gasoline along with the price of, let's say, CNG, which we have available in our community now, for $6,000 more to add that capacity to a vehicle, how many miles am I going to have to put on that vehicle over an X period of time before I get a return on investment? One of the things that we're adding in this budget, the budget that we're in right now, 2014 budget, is a CNG F-150 that's going to be in the building and development standards, or stormwater inspector, or one of the inspectors who's driving that vehicle. And the reason being is that's a high, they put a lot of miles on it. So our return on investment on that vehicle is about 5 years. Normal keeping that vehicle in our inventory is about 6 years. In a case like that, it's kind of soft. It could actually maybe be able to stretch it out 7 years. So after the 5 year period or 2 year period, we'll make the money back off that vehicle if the cost of CNG stays about where it is right now. Of course, that may go up. And we think over time, the cost of CNG outfitting will go down. It will go from $6,000 as that technology gets more and more integrated into it. One of the things we started thinking about, where else in our departments can we put this? Police department, there are some issues, mainly because police packages that are installed in vehicles, all the drives, the things that come with those typical fleet needs, again, the police department or the fire department, they're not comparable, the costs are so high to add alternative fuel technology to those vehicles that we wouldn't get a return on investment for a long time. So cost-wise, it just doesn't make much sense. So we started looking at other areas of administration, some of the other departments, and what we found is that given the cost for, let's say, Chevy Impala, 2015 Chevy Impalas are going to be available with a CNG biofuel option. And the biofuel option allows us to be able to use both gasoline and CNG so that we're not limited to that vehicle only being where we have CNG capability. And which was real important to us because a lot of our vehicles are taken out of the city or out of the area, and we don't want to be limited in where we can use the vehicles. But that vehicle is going to cost like $38,000. That's 27 years to get the return on investment on, so it makes no sense. So we're spending a lot of time reviewing what's the best option for us for alternative fuel vehicles. The Prius that we added 2 budgets ago, our last budget, the budget before that, it's been performing real well for us. We've got a lot of good data on back on in regards to that. When I give you the update on the strategic plan in July after the budget's passed, I will include some information on the performance of that vehicle to kind of give you an idea of how it's performing. However, that doesn't work real good for any when guys need a pickup truck, or it doesn't work real well for our inspectors, or obviously our police department, which needs certain types of vehicles. So where can we target that vehicle if it's going to be the one that we perform, that performs best for us? So we're examining all that, we're reviewing all that, we're getting the data together, we're just not making gut decisions on this. We are trying to get some empirical data so that we can make good informed decisions about where these vehicles need to be and what makes sense for us. And we plan to report back to council in regards to recommendations and moving forward in the future in that regard. In this particular budget, just a quick review of what's in this budget as far as vehicles go. This is under the capital equipment fund, which you should have a copy of it with you. The total number of vehicles that's being requested across the board, 14. That's broken down, and I'll try. I think I've got this in order that they are in the budget that you have. If you look on page 1 of 6, municipal court was about halfway down. They have a vehicle listed, 28,000. That vehicle right now, we started talking about adding a vehicle in that department. It was a CNG biofuel Impala. Come to find out the cost of that Impala is going to be about $10,000 more retail. What we're hoping though is that if that Impala gets picked up by state procurement and they negotiate a lower price, of course that comes in October, that we may be able to purchase that vehicle at a lower price. At this point, if that vehicle does not get down to within that range around $28,000, we probably will end up going just with regular Impala, flex fuel vehicle, which the cost will be reduced significantly. It's about I think it's $18,000, $19,000 to get a Chevy Impala. So you're looking at $20,000 more for a CNG package. Hopefully state contract will negotiate that lower, but if they don't, we will make that adjustment and at the time. We budget $28,000 for that. So there's one vehicle in courts. If you move to the fire department's requesting 2 vehicles. One will be, one of the other things that we're looking at is we also want to make it so that if we bring a vehicle into our inventory that's not limited to a single function, that it has multiple uses and it can move through a department or even move across departments and be used in multiple departments. So we're taking a look at what is the appropriate vehicle to bring in so that we can get, instead of coming up and saying, okay, I've had my car 10 years, it's time for me to get a new car or this position to get a new car. What we do is we say, where does that car best fit into the organization? And while your car may be moved out, we may move another car from somewhere else into that position and what makes sense. In this case, with the fire department, what we're taking a look at is bringing in a command vehicle and then shifting the current chief's vehicle to the fire marshal, which was purchased, I think, in last year's budget. And they also are replacing one of the first response vehicles, which is this, Mr. Earl's probably familiar with Squad 6, which is a 2002 Chevy Tahoe. It's got 88,000 miles on it. In this case, lots of wear and tear, but also we're moving to a much more fuel-efficient vehicle in Ford Expedition for that one. Total of the cost for replacement of those vehicles in the fire department is $67,750. That's on 2 line items in the budget. One is the vehicle line item, $59,500, and the other is under on page 3 of 6, which is the vehicle equipment. $8,250. If you add $8,250 to the $59,500, you get a total of $67,750. That's the total cost for those two vehicles in that particular department. I want to make sure that we point that out, because a lot of times there's questions about what's the actual cost of the vehicle. Police department, and moving into that department, there are 7 vehicles being requested. We are adding 4 patrol vehicles, or bringing in 4 patrol vehicles, 2 of the SRO vehicles, which are 2 of our older vehicles, both of them well over 100,000 miles will be replaced, and 1 new vehicle replacing a current vehicle in the CID. And one thing I do want to point out as we're going through this, these are not, as I said, adding. We're not adding anything. Any vehicle that comes into our inventory, there's a vehicle that goes out. So if we're bringing 14 in, we're going to take 14 out. So we will maintain that 132 or that 133 number by this time next year. We should be around that same area. Those vehicles, the total cost for those vehicles in the police department is $220,100. That's spread over 3 line items in the budget. If you look on page 3 of 6, you'll see $167,100 under vehicle. Then if you move down under the a little bit further down, 10.5-0435-700-854 in-car computer modems, 8,000, and right under that vehicle equipment, 45,000. That's to outfit all 7 vehicles. Just so you'll know that and that 8,000, that is primarily for the MDTs, and only 4 vehicles are getting the MDTs. The other 3 are not. And then out of the equipment of 45,000, that's the all 7 vehicles in whatever configurations that are needed for the department. The total is $220,100 for the police department.
Mike,
yes,
approximately how many cars do we have in the take-home program at the police department?
Brandon, you aware?
In the police department, we have a total of 65 current vehicles, but that includes a few deadlines, but we've got 1, 2, 3.
That's fine, you can keep it to me later.
I'll take a sense. We've got about 14, 15 of those that are not take-home. All the patrols except for 2 are take-home. We require, of course, our officers to be with the department for 2 years before they get a take-home vehicle. We've got a couple officers right now that have a vehicle assigned to them, but it's not a take-home vehicle. And then we have, of course, a few specialized vehicles that don't need to, that they're transport vehicles, things like that. But in the police department, probably about 50 around there.
What's the current rotation rate on those? I mean, what's the length of
We are
service on
currently
those
in the
cars?
process of getting rid of vehicles that are 2006. We're coming out of inventory now, so it's, in this case, that's 8 years. And that's where we're looking at that factor. It's 8 years too long. Should we bump that up a year, or is 8 years about right? Are we only going to see $500 more out of a car that's 1 year younger?
One of the things that we found is before we implemented the take-home program, we were finding that the replacement on patrol vehicles, particularly, that those were averaging more in the 5 to 6 year range, where now we're getting 8. So we're getting 2 to 3 years additional service out of the vehicle by it being assigned to a single person versus go out and get the keys to the next car. They just take better care of them.
Mm-hmm. I'm certainly not questioning the program. I'm just trying to figure out how we account for the fact that in a rotation like that, we may have an officer that's driving 20 miles round trip a day to go home, and we may have someone that's driving 68 miles round trip to go home every day.
You're absolutely right.
We do not have any restrictions on proximity.
Now, cars can get reassigned. I mean, even they may be issued to a single person.
And we do that, we move cars.
We will actually reassign a car if it's getting high mileage for that reason. We may pull that car off that individual and put it to a person with lower mileage, just to get the longer life on the mileage side of it.
And part of the program that we're entering into now, what me and Mr. Greer talked about, is really having definitive information on things like that to really pin down what is costing us and what, to help us be able to make better recommendations on what practices that we should have as far as the fleet goes. And that's the process that we're in, trying to get that data. Mr. Greer mentioned our efforts with asset management, and as we do more asset management with specialized software, it will help answer those questions for us more specifically.
Are we still analyzing maintenance costs as well to determine what's most appropriate for us to do in-house as opposed to contracting out?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there's a number of functions that we will not do just because the cost doesn't make sense for us to do it. Time-wise and
Equipment-wise?
maintaining parts and
Thank
things
you.
like that.
We don't want to make investment. We don't make a $75,000 investment for a piece of equipment that we would use 4 times a year.
Sure.
Let's
that's
farm that out.
Right.
Exactly.
Any other questions in regards to police? Just real quickly on the remaining departments, public services is asking, is requested to be budgeted one additional vehicle for operational use in the department. Of course, like I said, one vehicle will go in, one vehicle will come out. The recreation department is requesting an F-150. This is a case where, as Mr. Biggers mentioned a few minutes ago, we are budgeting a position that had not been budgeted for quite a while, that we had cut previously. We cut the vehicles last year to reduce the total number of vehicles available in that department. A vehicle will be added. In this case, with the recreation department, there will not be a one-to-one reduction. However, just on a side note, in looking at what we will be removing out of the budget, it was adding 14, but we're actually going to take out 15, so a vehicle actually will come out from another area. So it will compensate, and I've actually identified one additional vehicle that I believe will be able to come out of the fleet as well. It's not related to a new vehicle coming in, an excess vehicle. And then in the building and development standards, this is glad it's last, just to kind of address a few things with it. They're requesting 2 additional vehicles. We currently have 2 Ford Rangers that are being used in that department. The Rangers have a significant number of miles on them, a significant amount of wear and tear on them as well. It's time for them to come out of the inventory. There are 2 new F-150s that are being recommended in that particular department, and we are looking at bringing those in as CNG vehicles as well. What we're wanting to do is we are in the process of getting a CNG vehicle, F-150 for that department right now. In this current year's budget, we want to get about 6 months under our belt and examine fuel costs and performance out of the vehicles before we pull the trigger on order the other 2 vehicles. It's looking good. We're going to go ahead and bring those vehicles in as well. So we'll have at that point 4 alternative fuel vehicles in our fleet other than flex fuel, of course. But one will be the Prius that we have, and then we'll have 3 F-150 CNGs. All 3 of them will be in the building and development standards with our inspectors, which they put a significant amount of miles, do a lot of city driving, gas mileages at a minimum, but they put a significant number of miles on them.
What's the upcharge going for?
At this time, for those particular vehicles, it's $6,000.
You expect it to go down in the future?
I think it will. I mean, it's come down already from what it was. And the options for being able to install this in vehicles is changing as well. For instance, one of the things that we ran into is like recreation and public services. Public services and recreation, but we got vehicles that Skipper has vehicles that are 18 years old. It's got 22,000 miles on it. So we just don't put a lot of miles on it. But the vehicle's got a lot of wear and tear. However, if he gets a pickup truck and I put a 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep CNG gas tank in the bed of that truck, he loses bed space. He can't haul as much, he can't use the vehicle like he needs to. However, new technology is they're starting to mount these tanks up underneath the vehicles. And as that transitions more, of course, a little bit more expensive, that cost will start to come down. It'll make more sense operational-wise for the departments, and then at the same time brings the cost down so that for those vehicles that get a lot of use, but they don't get a lot of miles. Because it's about the fuel cost, how well we're saving between the cost of gasoline versus CNG. Any other questions regarding fleet?
Very good.
We're going to cover the rest of the capital.
And we're going to do that at a little different level. As you can see, there's, from a lease purchase capital perspective, we make large investments in technology, computers, equipment, those types of things. We certainly want to answer any questions that you may have about any of those line items. Other items of capital are relative to lawnmowers and equipment and those types of items. They're all identified. They're segmented out in the budget. We're glad to answer any questions about any of those individually, but they all apply respective to the appropriate department that they're budgeted under. But any issues to address relative to technology, computers, security that's showing up here?
Not unless there are any specific questions.
Total lease purchase this year, capital is a reduction. Last year we did $1,212,425. This year $841,495. If you follow that back up from last year, it's primarily because we didn't buy a fire truck. Those are pretty expensive items, and by not having that item in the budget, we stay pretty consistent on our lease purchase from year to year. Most of those items, we do those on a 5-year basis. Is that correct, David? On a 5-year basis, unless it's something like a fire truck, and then we extend those out longer. But all of these items, that's why when we put an item into use, we know up front that we've got to get a minimum of 5 years out of it because we're paying for it over 5 years. So we want to make sure that we're not pulling anything out of inventory prior to that 5-year mark. Everything's got to reach that and beyond. Questions about any of the capital lease purchase items? Very good. We'll keep you moving. I have asked David to share with you one of the things that we've done in the past is we've kind of said this is our debt service budget. And debt is debt. It is what it is. We've made commitments, we've purchased items, and now we've got to pay the bank. But I thought it would be important this year for us to be reminded of where our debt is and what it's for. We do a good job of maintaining that debt. We keep a close eye on it. But I think it's important for you to be aware of what we have current debt on. So David?
Thank you, Mr. Greer, Mayor and Council. First, I'll just start in total, the debt service fund, which is for us fund number 12. The total proposed budget is $1,664,866. Now, rather than going department by department, we're choosing or electing to present this in the perspective of the debt itself. Because it is our total debt, it is divided among our departments depending on where those charges are allocated, depending on the equipment they were purchased originally. So looking at this from the debt basis, for that total $1.6 million that we're budgeting for debt service, comprised of that is 6 current lease purchases, 1 revenue bond, 4 general obligation bonds, and then the current year's anticipated lease purchase that we will be entering into for this budgeted year once that is passed by council. So all of those items, the 6 lease purchases is about $889,000, 1 revenue bond, almost $69,000, the 4 general obligation bonds, a debt service of $649,000, and then anticipating a new lease purchase at about $57,000. Now the sources of those revenues is $1,391,252. That's just under $1.4 million coming from the general fund, an additional $273,614 coming from hospitality to help cover some of those debt service costs. Now those debts that are there add up to a total outstanding debt at this time of $7,140,176. So that is the debt that is budgeted in the debt service fund. As you're aware, the Greer Trust holds debt that is not budgeted in this fund. The debt service debt is paid from the rent that you saw in our general government that we asked about earlier. The debt outstanding for Greer Trust right now is $14,258,351. So all of that added together is $21,398,527. So that's the total debt of the city plus the debt of the Greer Trust, which we're paying for through our rent agreement with the Greer Trust. We have to take any questions you may have.
If not, we'll move on. We'll take a look at Fund 18, hospitality taxes, and then right after that, we'll look at Fund 50, the facilities use fund. Both of these primarily through the recreation department. You will see that we are anticipating $1,512,575 to the hospitality fund. Those are primarily, the two largest expenditures on page 1 of 2 on the expense side is $1,056,461 that's being transferred to the general fund, Fund 11, and $273,614 to debt service. That's $1,330,075 of the $1,512,575. You'll see below that operational expenses. We put some of those dollars in for festivals, the International Festival, the Freedom Blast Festival, our art series. We have some special contracts that we work with outside vendors in working with us through that. Our contribution to Family Festival, our contribution to the museum, Greer Cultural Arts, as well as some Christmas decorations that we purchase each year. At this point, really mostly repair and replacement. We've got some new ones being. That's the rooftop light. So all of our street fixtures we're holding steady on, and this would be for those. Some renovations at Kids Planet. I'm sorry, wrong line item. City Stadium, $18,000, and of particular interest this year may be the one that we've marked as City Park for $52,000. And I'll ask you to provide some additional information on that. That's been something we've been trying to fund here for a couple of years.
It is. It's actually a foreign press surface. It's a hard surface. Well, I say it's a hard surface. It is a hard surface in that it's a safety material that we use, or that is used in place of all of the mulch, all of that rubber mulch. We would use it somewhere else, but I don't think this is the place for it. But the amount of volume of children that come there, material that comes up from the bottom that allows for drainage, protection between that mulch and the rock that's underneath it, it's difficult for us to keep it under that surface. So I think this is the best solution for this park. It's been very successful in other parks all over. So that's certainly something we're recommending.
So that allows us to do that as well. Questions relative to hospitality fund? And we can certainly come back. And also has responsibility in working with our facilities use fund. This is what we call Fund 50. These are the dollars that we collect from the rental of property, this building, the Cannon Center, shelters. Those dollars are brought in. They're held truly in escrow. We're anticipating $157,370 in revenue over the next year. And then on pages 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, you can see how that $157,370 is planned to be spent. We do have, as we would receive dollars into that fund, dollars received, less dollars spent. We continue to hold in escrow. Those are what we call reserved for replacement as we prepare to need to replace chairs, paint these facilities, but make improvements to those rental properties. We go back to Fund 50 to do those out of that fund. Some of the part-time labor that's necessary for, that is exclusive to rental of facilities, we pay those salaries out of the expense of Fund 50 as well.
And that also just, includes the staff that we have at the museum.
Correct. Yeah, our contribution to assisting the Heritage Museum, we pay those positions out of this Fund 50 as well.
I have a question about that line item. We're
Okay.
going, let's see, 15,000 last year, 15,000 this year. At some point, I'd like some statistics on that museum, number of visitors, how many times we are supplying the folks to open and close and run it.
Oh, the museum?
Yes.
I can give you.
Yeah, we have that data. We'll be glad to forward it.
Aren't we supposed, is there not supposed to be some volunteers, museum folks helping staff that?
They do.
Do they do it on a consistent basis?
In addition to, we just have it open for additional hours, additional days, that they don't have a volunteer corps to serve. The $10,000 is budgeted in the hospitality funds. Those funds are actually transferred at the end of the year to cover the salaries that we take out of
Right.
to cover that part-time staff. But I can give you all of that information.
Please, just email it.
Questions on Fund 50? If we could, we'll go to Fund 60, and that's the road paving fund. This is the one we are reminded that we have a revenue source of dollars that we can use for paving outside of the dollars that we make available through our budget. But you see on the revenue side that we transfer into Fund 60. We transfer into Fund 60 from Fund 11, which is a general fund, the $200,000. And then we also have $100,000 that's coming from the Greenville County side, and then reimbursement to us from the Spartanburg County side of an additional $100,000. So $400,000 available to us. We then take that $400,000, we allocate $50,000 of it to sidewalks. We allocate $100,000 of it to special projects on the Spartanburg County side, and then we allocate $250,000 to the Legislative Delegation Transportation Committee, which then enables us to receive an additional $250,000 because they match those dollars. So for our $400,000, we are able to do $650,000 of paving projects. And so it has leveraged very well for us. I think we're continuing to get a good handle on things that need to be done. Don has seemed to be very pleased, but Don, I'll ask you if you've got any comments of how we are progressing with road paving at this level.
Seems to be working quite nicely, especially picking up in Spartanburg County. We're attempting to give us the ability to match and do some leverage there that we didn't have.
They are actually looking at a very similar program to the Greenville side to do match. And if that's the case, then we'll add another $100,000 of paving within the city on top of what we've been able to do in the past. So we're very excited about the match programs. That we can match dollar for dollar. We try to leverage that as much as we can.
Mr. Driggers, on page 1 of 1.
Yes, sir.
Not the cover, not the red.
The second one, yes, sir.
Line items, parking lot, traffic calming, and sidewalks. You've got $122,000 there total, but zero has been spent this year. Is that going to be spent for year end, or is that just?
Well, the good thing about, because this is an escrow fund, that it doesn't, June 30th isn't magical for it, but those monies don't disappear. And that's a very good point, as you will see that this last year, we appropriated $50,000 for traffic calming, and we're not requesting that this year. That $50,000 stays in the fund, so that if we get requests for speed humps, speed bumps, that money's still there. It doesn't go, general fund money goes into fund balance, and it kind of you can't use it again, it has to be reappropriated.
So this road paving fund can have a fund balance?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, it can, and it has in the past. I will say now it may even have a little bit negative. It's right on mark. It's right at zero, because what we do is any dollars we have, we'll leverage it to the match program. So if there's $50,000 left in it that isn't earmarked for traffic calming or some specific use, if it's road paving, we'll take those dollars and leverage those to the county immediately. Because if there's $50,000, we can get $100,000 worth of paving done.
Sure, but
Right.
okay, so if we're zero, where did the $122,000 go?
It's in there.
Oh, it's in there, because it's earmarked.
So there is a fund balance.
Yes, sir.
There will be for this year. The $22,000 there is the parking lot paving project that we discussed earlier.
Okay.
That's the
okay,
project at
okay.
the OC.
$50,000 for traffic and the $50,000 for sidewalks will sit in that fund, in fund balance. But we haven't had those excess type of allocations in prior years. So we're relatively zero right now. But once we roll this year over, those $100,000 will go into fund balance and sit there.
Gotcha.
It's very, very important for us to obligate those funds, because I don't want to take the $50,000 that was earmarked for traffic calming. It's the end of the year. I take those dollars and I spend them in the match program, and then we get 3 or 4 requests for speed humps, and there's no money. So we segregate it out, we encumber it to that use. And I didn't recommend an appropriation for traffic calming of additional dollars until we start spending the ones that are there. But that's our road paving fund. The stormwater fund, which is Fund 19, we're anticipating $646,700. That's a pretty consistent fund for us. It can go up a little bit. You can see last year it's actually at 710,961. It'll come somewhere in that $650,000 to $700,000 range. But we try to budget it based on what we bill for that. We can have the same situation. We can have some delinquents that are paid later. The numbers can go up or down from year to year. But 409,701 of those are transferred back to Fund 11, the general fund, for expenses of the stormwater program. And then you can see expenditures under operating expenses, anything from materials and supplies, public education, operation of vehicles, motor vehicle fuel, stormwater projects, which is that larger share. Stormwater projects, $176,899, special contracts, and some computer software is required. That gets us to the $646,700. We do hope the stormwater fund is another one of those that if we have excess revenues over expenditures, they go into a fund balance for stormwater. They're earmarked for stormwater only. Do you recall what might be in that fund right now? About $600,000-700,000. It gives us the ability. Don is now able to do. We're being able to do larger projects that in the past we had to do very small projects, and we're being able to get scheduled in some of the larger projects. Like this morning.
Add one?
Yeah, we added one this morning. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We discovered our own sinkhole. So we're working on it. But that's the stormwater fund. That's the $75 per parcel and how we spend those dollars. Fund 33 is the Public Services Fund. Please note that nowhere in the title of that is it called the 40% fund. It is the Public Services Fund. But it is an allocation by ordinance. It is an allocation of revenue to that of 40% of the operating expenses of the Public Services Department, and we take corresponding percentage of the Public Services Department, and that's what you see on the expense side. It operates as an enterprise fund. Again, that's the $75 per parcel. The other was the $25 per parcel. Exactly. You knew what I was talking about. But it's 40% of the expense of that fund. It is stabilizing. We'll get a better feel in the audit this year. It has a negative. I mean, the fund does still have a deficit, but the deficit is diminishing. It's getting smaller, and so we still believe that we're in a position that we can continue to monitor that, and that hopefully the revenue stream will catch up with that. We're not overly concerned at this point. And the last one is the Recreation Program Fund, Fund 9, and truly, that is whatever fees Ann collects for her various recreation programs. We book those as a revenue, and then we book it as an expense on the expense side. It can vary from item to item. If more money comes in for that project, it'll have a higher revenue, but it has a corresponding higher expense, or less revenue, less expense. It is a bookkeeping entry for her fees that's associated with her different programs. Dollars in, dollars out. Those are all of the funds of the city. The only fund that we did not have an appropriation in this year was the Real Property Fund, simply because we don't have any planned expenditures in that fund. There could be expense or revenue to the fund during the year. There just isn't anything that's being budgeted through that, and that's the reason if you don't see anything on the Real Property Fund. That's the one that we buy and sell property out of.
You're not doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show yet?
She's not.
No, certainly not. We're actually going to do something a little different along the lines of Night of the Living Dead. So we're actually going to have something a little different.
I won't be at the
We're doing something in conjunction
zombie walk.
with Usury. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Again, we're very pleased with the budget from the perspective that it's balanced, and that's always a nice way to approach the budget. Is that we're not challenged at this point of what do we add or subtract. We certainly have the ability to amend it. That is at your discretion, but it is balanced at this point. And again, it doesn't require an amendment to ad valorem, business license, fees, or assessments to balance the budget. So I present this budget to you as my recommended budget, and over the next several weeks, if there is a direction for us to make amendments to that, we certainly will receive that information and make those amendments as we be directed by council. Mayor, at this point, we certainly again ask if there are any questions, and for some guidance on the process moving forward, if we would need to have any additional workshops or not, or how we would need to move forward. Our staff is available tonight. They are prepared to answer any questions that you may have, and they certainly will continue to be available as you continue to peruse the budget.
Thank you, sir. Council, any thoughts in that regard as to how you would wish to proceed? That will give us one more meeting in May and then 2 in June to have this approved. So we can go ahead and at least give some discussion of whether or not we want to schedule more workshop type time, or we want to go ahead and put the budget on the agenda to begin the process here in the next meeting or two and go from there. So just thoughts or ideas at this point?
I reviewed the budget some today, and there's not anything major that pops out at me. I'd like to request that if we can possibly hold a first reading next meeting.
Okay.
And then the first meeting in June, we'll have a public hearing, and we can do final reading if everything.
We can move it up, absolutely.
Council, others? Sounds good. I think it's an excellent idea, and we'll move along those lines then.
So we will schedule first reading at the May 27th meeting, and we will schedule public hearing and second reading at the June 10th meeting. Yep.
Okay. Council? Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
It's really rather boring. There's nothing to fight about.
With that, we'll draw to a close.